scars. I carry my scars. I know what I hear. I won't live in fear. I won't live in fear. I won't live in fear. I sit by the stream. I'm counting my dreams. I'm counting my dreams. My face to the sun. My battle half won. My battle half won. My battle half won. My battle half won.
Support for Radio Bristol comes from Appalachian RC&D Council and the Summerfield School for Beginning Farmers, May through August. 8 sessions provide an overview of the diversity of small farm enterprises in our region. Details available at arcd.org. Broadcasting from the birthplace of country music, this is WBCM LP Bristol.
Everybody talking about the sweetie nowadays. I got the one with the sweetest ways. Your baby may roll a jelly fine. Nobody, baby, can roll it like mine. Your baby ain't sweet like mine. She makes a jelly roll all the time. And when I'm feeling lonesome and blue, my baby knows just what to do. Yes, sir, she even called me honey. She even let me spend the money. Never has a baby put me out door. She even buys me all my clothes. I don't want to brag, I want to put you in line. Your baby ain't sweet like mine, no, no. Your baby ain't sweet like mine. Your baby ain't sweet like mine. She bake a jelly roll all the time. And when I'm feeling...
So hello, everyone, and welcome to the Birthplace of Country Music Museum tonight. We're glad to see all of you here at the start of spooky season. We're really glad to have you with us. Also, anyone who is with us on YouTube, welcome to you too. I'm Renee Rogers. I'm the museum director here at the Birthplace of Country Music Museum. My colleague Josh Littleton is running tech with a little bit of help from James and Leah. We're excited to host author Joe Tennis tonight. He will be talking to us about local history and spooky stories. He's also joined by his son, John Patrick Tennis, who will be sharing some music with us. So we're glad to have both of them with us. Before we get started, I just have a few housekeeping things to tell you about, there we go. If you haven't been with us before and you need to leave to go to the restrooms are just down the hallway to the left here. The front of the museum, so the doors that you all came through when you came in tonight, those will be locked in about 15 minutes. So if you do need to leave early, please just exit through the doors, the double doors that are just right outside this theater. We will have a Q&A afterwards, so you'll have a chance to ask Joe and John some questions. And if you do have any questions from the folks in the YouTube, just put those in the chat and we'll keep an eye out for them. We always send a survey out afterwards to get people's thoughts and feedback on the program that they've just experienced. It really helps us with planning ahead for next year, so please do fill that out if you have time. And also, please consider sharing a donation after tonight's program. There is a link in the chat with the YouTube, but the museum also has a donation jar over there at the doorway. The museum offers mostly free or low-cost programming to our community, so that anything that you do give us helps us to create programs like this one and make them fully accessible. Before we get into conversation, let's introduce tonight's speaker and also our musician. Joe Tennis is a longtime collector of history and folklore from Virginia's Blue Ridge Highlands. A Radford University graduate, Joe has contributed articles to numerous publications, including Blue Ridge Country, the Bristol Herald-Courier, the Roanoke Times, the Virginia Pilot, Virginia Living, and Appalachian Voice. He is the author of 11 books on history and ghosts across Virginia, Tennessee, and North Carolina. And as a storyteller, he has appeared on stages from Kentucky to Virginia Beach. His son, John Patrick Tennis, 19 years old, has been playing guitar for about 3 or 4 years now. He's a graduate of John S. Battle High School, just up the road from here, and he has started playing live locally, so keep your eyes out for any other gigs he might have. But we're glad to have him with us tonight to give us some musical accompaniment to go along with the history and scary stories we're going to hear from Joe. I'm going to hand it over to Joe now, and we will have some questions afterwards, so enjoy.
Hello. Boo. Bowling Wilson, Edith Bowling Wilson. She was the second wife of Woodrow Wilson. And there's a hotel named for her up in Wytheville, Virginia, the Edith Bowling Wilson Hotel, built in 1927, which I think everybody can raise your hand. You know why 1927 is so important to this museum. That was the year that Ralph Peer came down and found Jimmy and found AP and Sarah and Maybelle, and that's how we ended up being the birthplace of country music. We're right up on Highway 11, about an hour from here. Beautiful building. Now, Edith was born on October 12th, that's just a couple days ago, 1872, above what is now Skeeter's Hot Dog Restaurant. And they had a little shop up there called Edith's Attic. And if you know your history at all, you may know that Woodrow Wilson was our president during World War I, but he had a stroke, and Edith was basically running the country. And she got the title of America's first woman president because she was basically watching everything that he was looking at. Well, she grew up for a few years in Wytheville, and across the street there is where the Bowling Wilson Hotel was built in 1927. Now, this has been not only just a hotel, it's been a bank, it's been an apartment house. And a few years ago, I talked to a man named Tinker. That's his nickname. He was a maintenance man there. And Tinker told me at that apartment house there was one lady, oh boy, she looked like she combed her hair with a vacuum cleaner. She had multicolored hair, but that wasn't the only thing scary about this old place that was known as the George Wythe Hotel and a bank as well. They said that ghostly spirits would start to inhabit this building. The elevator would run all by itself, and they would hear flushing. The toilet would flush all over the floor on the 3rd floor, and Tinker would run and try to figure out what was going on. He could never figure out. They'd heard all the water, but there was no actual evidence that the toilets were actually flushing. They only heard the sound. What got even more crazy is they'd go to the cabinets and there was no toilet paper. The ghosts were still in the toilet paper. One lady said she was sitting at her desk and the typewriter just started typing all on its own. People were losing stuff everywhere. They began to call these ghosts Trish and Josh. And they had a computer repairman come in one time on the 3rd floor, and this lady said, y'all best be careful now, because we got some ghosts in this building, and you might lose your stuff. You better put it away. And the guy said, oh, I don't believe in no ghosts. I ain't going to get me. They left their stuff out, and lo and behold, all their stuff ended up on the 4th floor the next morning when they came back. Now, as this was a hotel, there was something else that was kind of crazy about it. There was a man named Mr. Daugherty there, and I spoke to him, and he said, well, yeah, I was working the front desk here, and I didn't believe in ghosts. I was a skeptic. I ain't nothing like that. But so one day I was working up here, and all of a sudden there's this man. This is 2 o'clock in the morning. He comes out. He's got him an umbrella. He puts his glove on one hand, and he puts his glove on the other hand. He's got a big jacket on, and he puts his top hat on. And he comes by me, and he tips his top hat, and he goes out the door. And I looked at a coworker of mine, and I said, who was that guy at 2 o'clock in the morning? He said, oh, you saw him? He said, yeah. He said, well, he was a waiter here. He died 10 years ago. That's when they started believing in the ghostly waiter. There was a lady named Tess Monday who I talked to in 2019. She said she was in the gift shop, and she saw a man with a big coat and a top hat. And when she walked over to talk to him, said, hello, and he just vanished. Mr. Daugherty also said that not only had he seen this man, but he'd hear this tinkling sound in the dining room, like plates and cups and spoons and things moving around. It was like that ghostly waiter was still in the dining room trying to reset the tables after all these years of being gone. Now, this sort of got me a little bit familiarized and kind of a deja vu type thing. I found this story from my latest book called The Ghostly Tales of Virginia's Blue Ridge Highlands, The Ghost of the Bowling Wilson Hotel. And it reminded me of a story I did in my first ghost tale book, The Marble and Other Ghost Tales of Tennessee and Virginia, 1 hour south of Bristol down in Greenville, Tennessee, my mother's hometown. And there's a place down there called the General Morgan Inn. Have you ever been down there? That's a beautiful hotel right next to the First Baptist Church. My granddaddy lived in Greenville all his life, and he and my grandma would go to church, and they'd go down to the Hotel Brumley, that's what it was called, and they might have met a particular lady, and she might have actually served them way back in the mid-20th century. My granddaddy was born in 1902 and passed away in 1980. There's a waitress down there at the General Morgan Inn known as Green Room Grace, except that she's not a waitress anymore. She's a ghost, and she steals the spoons out of the green room. Every time they put down the knives and the forks and the spoons, they come back and they're like, where's the spoons? They just keep losing them all the time. I love stories about hotels. And hotels are, obviously hotels are the most transient place we're going to find. People are coming and going, all kinds of different spirits and energy and emotions and happiness and sadness and gladness and everything that you can name. Whatever emotion you have, it's going to be there in the hotels and the motels and the bed and breakfasts and places like the Prospect Hill Bed and Breakfast in Mountain City, Tennessee. Beautiful place over in Johnson County, Tennessee. Now, it's east side of Bristol. And over there was a guy who was sleeping there one night, and he was like, He woke up, came down for breakfast, because, in a bed and breakfast, that's the cozy, homey thing. I love staying at those because you get to sit there and have breakfast with the owners, and you have conversations going on for 2 and 3 hours. Everybody gets to know each other. And he says, I sure can't wait to have some of those peanut butter cookies. And the owner said, peanut butter cookies? And he said, yeah, I could smell them cooking all night long, those peanut butter cookies. And I thought, I just can't wake up and have some of those peanut butter cookies. But there was no peanut butter cookies. It was a ghost that liked peanut butter cookies. They would smell that all the time at the Prospect Hill Bed and Breakfast. 2 hours north of Bristol, you're going to run into the old Mountain Lake Lodge, the Mountain Lake Hotel, the famous mountain lake that's known in the movie Dirty Dancing. Half of that movie was filmed at Mountain Lake. 40% was filmed down at Lake Lure in North Carolina, and about 10% was filmed on a soundstage. Now, when they began working on this particular movie, they didn't call it Dirty Dancing, because, this is Giles County, Virginia. This is 1986. This is the Bible Belt. You're way back in the woods. You're behind Virginia Tech towards West Virginia. They're not going to call it Dirty Dancing because they thought, my God, if we call it Dirty Dancing, they're going to think we're making a dirty movie. So they just called it Dancing. That's all it is. We're making a movie called Dancing. And they had all kinds of stuff. They had to do everything in the world when they did this movie because it was not the right time of year to get out there and swim in that lake. It's not the time of year to go up there now and swim in the lake because there's not much of a lake up there. This lake is coming and going all the time. It's built on, it's not built on anything. God built it. It's the only natural freshwater lake in the mountains of Virginia. The other natural freshwater lake that we have is Lake Drummond in the middle of the Great Dismal Swamp, way east of Bristol, out on the Suffolk-Chesapeake border. Well, now up at Mountain Lake, they had to do all kinds of things because they were filming this in autumn. So they had to actually go out and paint with paint. Paint the leaves to make them look green. And they had the actors just chilling, running out there in the gazebo and in the water and splashing out on that beach and everything. And you remember all the scenes from that movie. But they probably never would have made that movie if Mary Moody Northern had still been living. Mary Moody Northern, her daddy, Mr. Moody. Now, they were from way down in Texas area, and she was an old, proper lady. For many, many years in the hotel, they have not wanted to have televisions in the hotel because she didn't want televisions in the hotel. You could get Wi-Fi and sit there on your phone, watch anything you want, but no televisions in the main hotel. Today, they say if you go up to Mountain Lake, and I've talked to people who said, yes, in the dining room, all of a sudden, there she is. She just shows right up. Mary Moody Northern, this big image of this woman just sort of staring at you, and then you look back again, and she's gone. And you go down to this beautiful cabin down there at the far end of the lake. And this one gentleman told me that he saw, there she was right up there. And he looked back, and she was gone. And this guy had worked there for many years, and he said, you know what? I'm just seeing things. I'm going to figure this out. He went in there. He started going at certain times of day. He was taking pictures and looking, and he was moving furniture, and he was moving plants and looking at this shadow and this one and that one and that. He could never figure out why in the devil is her face staring at me. He's like, I don't see anything. I just saw something. And he just kind of forgot all about it. He went back out there. He looked up. Oh, there she is again. And she's staring right down at him. Now, if you go into room 100, I've been there. There's this really heavy air inside room 100. She's still there. That was her room. Her presence is still there. I've sensed a few things. Y'all gonna think I'm insane when I tell you that, but I have sensed a few things at a few places. And I sensed something there at room 100. Now, some of the other places I've been and written about, John and I stayed at the Inn at Wise many years ago. I didn't know it was haunted. I kind of heard it was haunted. And one of the news stories that I've written in the book was to explore what was going on at the Inn at Wise. When these boys were running, they were on a track team and such, and they were doing this athletic thing, and they were kind of running through the hallway, and all of a sudden they fell down, and they heard this laughing little boy just laughing at them, and they're like, where in the dickens did he come from? They're looking around, and they're like, there's no little boy. How did we just hear that? Crazy stuff inside of hotels. Just crazy, crazy stuff. But it's not just hotels and these old historic landmarks. One of the things that I've loved looking at in any of the books that I've explored is historic landmarks. And the books that I've done since 2004, I've looked at places that are on the National Historic Landmarks Register. And if you've lived in Bristol long enough, you will remember one of the greatest gentlemen that ever lived in this town, Mr. V.N. Bud Phillips, the Bristol historian. And he got me started with books. He encouraged me with books. And he wrote some ghost stuff. And later I was actually able to help him get a couple of books published. And he passed on about 8 years ago. And one of the things that Bud used to tell me about ghost tales is he kind of called them a byproduct of historical research. You're looking for this, and you're looking about how this place got built in 1871 and 1872, and then Bud would say,
and oh, by the way, there would be somebody over here, and if you kind of walk down this way, they had put this little loft in right here, and the gentleman came in, and the slave lady, that was a long time ago. You had a Native American lady, and of course you do know that there's a ghost here. Oh, there's a ghost all over the place. And it would show up at all the time.
He's told me about the ghost of the Bristol train station. He told me about Mr. Chalmers King. And he told me he saw Mr. Chalmers King. And as Bud told me,
well, Mr. King was down there at the Bristol train station, and he had lost his love, and he kept going back to the train station and looking around and trying to find out, well, where is she? Where is she? He'd show up about every 3 or 4 years, and of course he had a derby hat and everything, and kind of an old dress, and of course you could tell he didn't belong there.
Every 3 or 4 years he'd show up. And then that old station was gone. He found his way into the new station that's standing down there now. Arthur Slaughter owned the Bristol train station. Arthur Slaughter wanted where we are right here to be down there. And he sold the train station and made a donation after that. And he loved that train station. Arthur Slaughter was a businessman in Bristol for many years, quite a legend in Bristol. And Mr. Slaughter really wanted us to honor this music history that we have here in this town. He wanted to know that, listen, Jimmy Rogers influenced Merle Haggard, and he influenced Hank Williams. He influenced B.B. King and Elvis Presley, who influenced the Beatles, who went on to the Southern Rock, the Allman Brothers, and Leonard Skinner, and there was Dolly Parton with Jimmy Rogers, and it goes on and on and on. The great musicians that we are honoring here in this museum, the Carter family and Jimmy Rogers, basically are the cornerstones behind modern country music, Southern rock, and even much of what we see with rock and roll music. It was all like a funnel that kind of moved in, and it all kind of happened here in Bristol, this train town. And they chose this to happen in 1927 because this was a train town. Oh, they'd been recording country music all the way, 3 or 4 years before this, and it kind of got started even in New York City. But it was kind of fledgling. It was hillbilly music, Southern sounds, Southern series, all this kind of stuff. Nobody was really calling it country music in those days. But they kind of looked on the map, and Pop Stoneman had already been recording. He was from the Galax area. And some other musicians, Henry Witter among them, and they said, you know what, Bristol looks good. Look at all these trains coming together. You had that train going up to Mendota and on over towards Scott County and on through Big Box and got up to the coal fields. Train going down to Tennessee, train going up into Virginia. This is a good place to be. And you've got this Main Street out here on the Tennessee-Virginia border. This is a good place to be. This is a boom. Let's do it here. We're going to have people from all over the place coming up here, and of course, that's what happened. But why did the train end up here? Was the train supposed to end up here? If you go down to Tennessee High School, sometimes on the Bristol, Tennessee side of town, you might hear the phantom train. You might just sort of hear a sound of a train passing through. That was because there was an engineer there, and he wanted the train to not be where it is today, but he kind of wanted it to be down that way. And the thought is that he wanted to kind of move the train over in that section, and now as a ghost, he's still running his train through Tennessee High School. Now that is connected to the old Viking Hall Civic Center. Raise your hand if you miss Viking Hall Civic Center. All the Def Leppard, Bob Dylan, Gordon Lightfoot. Gosh, we got to see a lot of great people there. And one man you might have been lucky enough to see in the 1980s was a man who was influenced not only by Jimmie Rodgers, but equally by the Carter family, Mr. Johnny Cash.
I hear the train a-comin', it's rolling around the bend, and I ain't seen the sunshine since I don't know when. Well, I'm stuck in Folsom Prison, and time keeps dragging on. But that train keeps a-rolling on down to San Antone. When I was just a baby, my mama told me, son, always be a good boy, don't ever play with guns. But I shot a man in Reno just to watch him die. When I hear that whistle blowing, I hang my head and cry. Well, if they freed me from this prison, if that railroad train was mine, I bet I'd move it on a little farther down the line, far from Folsom Prison. That's where I want to stay. And I'd let that lonesome whistle blow my blues away.
So Folsom Prison Blues is telling about a story of a man who wants to get out of prison and get on the train. The Mendota Trail, you ever been on the Mendota Trail? One of our beautiful railroad trails that we have today. And I wrote a book about all of the railroad trails across all of Virginia. And not a whole lot of a ghostly type thing in that particular book, but it was kind of the same concept. You have something that's living and breathing, a train that's snorting and puffing, and locomotives and all of this good stuff, and passengers and all these things and all this, and then it dies. And then people may want to build it, they don't want to build it. I don't know if I don't want that in my backyard. I don't want that trail here. That's what we heard for years about the Mendota Trail. It's like, I know, no Mendota Trail. We don't want that thing here. Today, people are going out there and going, we got a Mendota Trail here. The county owns it. This is pretty cool, especially because of what happened September 27th of 2024, they're like, we ain't got no Virginia Creeper Trail anymore. We got a Mendota Trail, though, so at least we can come over here and look at this. Now, the Mendota Trail's 12 miles long, and it started right by the potato chip factory and on Island Road and goes on up, and I've been following and writing about this for decades, it seems. And when I wrote one of my earlier books called Haunts of Virginia's Blue Ridge Highlands, I wrote the story of this train that could have been a trail, but was never going to be a trail. So now you can just go out here and look at this old trestle if you're on your boat, and that's it. And I took my little John boat up and paddled upstream and on the North Fork of the Holston and came back down, and took a picture of it and wrote about the old story of the Southern Railroad and how it stopped running trains in 1972. And when I came with the opportunity to work on the latest book, The Ghostly Tales of Virginia's Blue Ridge Highlands, the publisher said, well, would you like to update any of your other stories or add anything from that particular book? And I said, well, yeah, really. I said, it's now a trail. I said, I'd love to look at it in a different way. And to kind of give you just a little idea is that this train ran on to Bristol and on to Benhams. There was passenger trains on there for a while. And there was scenic excursion trains on there for a while. And it goes through the Wolf Run Gorge. Not really big waterfalls by any means, except if you go into the woods, something that Washington County, Virginia was able to acquire is the biggest and grandest of all the waterfalls in Washington County, which is Abrams Falls, is actually part of county property now in Washington County, Virginia. And the ultimate plan is that the Washington County and the leaders around here want to turn all that into a state park eventually, hopefully. Well, for now, it's just a railroad trail. And it's beautiful. It's great. And if you go all the way to the North Fork of the Holston River like I did, and I did it on a boat, and I went again on a kayak, wrote an article about that with Adventure Mendota many years ago, and noticed a little cave over there by the trestle that I came under. And then they started rebuilding all this stuff, and I looked at this and I said, well, this is a beautiful bridge. I said, this is very unlike any. I've been to all of the railroad trails from Fredericksburg up to Northern Virginia and on out over to Cape Charles, Virginia Beach, Suffolk, on up into Jackson River, Salem, Roanoke, everywhere. I said, nobody has this little bypass thing like y'all got. I said, this is like one of the, I said, even the beautiful High Bridge Trail in Farmville, this is very distinct from that. And that darn thing's about a quarter mile long. And they said, well, you do know it's haunted. I said, I do know it's haunted. Yes, I do know it's haunted. It's called the Sunnyside Bridge. You know why it's called the Sunnyside Bridge? Because of the family we're honoring here, the Carter family. Keep on the sunny side. Y'all can start singing it if you want. You can either sing the original version or you can sing that old motel commercial version, whatever you want to do. But it's called the Sunnyside Bridge. And if you stand there long enough, beware. Because it was a prison chain gang that built this railroad. And there was one man who decided, I ain't going to be on this chain gang no more. And he looked down at that river and he thought, I could just jump. Boom! I done got my freedom. Well, he jumped, got swelled down in there and rocks and everything else. One story says he ended up in this little tiny cave over there and kind of went around. He died. And today, if you stand on that bridge, on that beautiful trail, 1 mile before you get into the sweet little old town of Mendota, look up at Clinch Mountain and look down the road, you might feel this icy grips on your ankle of the ghostly prisoner who's trying to climb back on that bridge, and he's squeezing your ankles, and his hands are just as cold as ice coming out of that river. Now that train at Mendota, the county owns the property to the Scott County line. Now they're not planning at this point now to cross over Mendota Road and build it to the Scott County border. but they could. They keep talking about doing things, and Bristol leaders are talking about doing stuff downtown, and they want to get the train all the way back down to here, really. They want to get it back down to the downtown section. And one of the original plans on that particular trail is this was supposed to be, and when the city of Bristol was talking about it, and I was interviewing people, oh, Lord, 20, 25 years ago, they're like, this could be the country music walk. I wrote an article in the newspaper about a year or two ago, and I said that we could make this the Cash to Casino Trail. And they said, well, why is that? And I said, well, because you're going to be about 2 miles away from the casino, and you're going to be about 7 miles away from where Johnny Cash played his final concerts at the Carter Fold. And if you take a left on the A.P. Carter Highway, and you kind of keep following down into Scott County, eventually when you get down to the Carter Fold and you park in that parking lot like you could on a Saturday night, and as you go from that parking lot over to the beautiful, wonderful, you have to go see the Carter Fold, you're going to cross over that old railroad line. Now, the Carter family, they came over here, and of course, you know, they had flat tires on their way when they got here, and they collected songs all over the mountains. A.P. Carter was a genius in collecting songs all over the mountain. If you get to know the character of A.P. Carter, he'll become a hero. He's a wonderful gentleman. And he went over at one point, right after a particular disaster, and he did something that one of my musical heroes did. You ever heard the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, Gordon Lightfoot? I got a chance to talk to Gordon. He passed on a couple of years ago. I got a chance to talk to Gordon Lightfoot on the telephone one time for about an hour. And when he came here to Viking Hall. And the great thing that Gordon Lightfoot did to bring this kind of maybe in more of a modern context is back in the 70s, there was up on the Great Lakes, there was a shipwreck. And Gordon Lightfoot took all of the new stuff and kind of added on this stuff. And next thing you know, he had himself a brand new folk song, except he wasn't singing about something from 1841. He was singing about something that happened just a few months ago. And it was all lifelike and real. And as the news reports got a little bit more accurate, he had to change the lyrics as he went along, as he continued on with this particular song. Well, that's what A.P. Carter was doing too. He went right over into one of the next valleys in Scott County, into a little place called Rye Cove, Virginia. Now, in May of 1929, the worst, deadliest tornado tragedy in Virginia history happened about an hour west of Bristol. The Rye Cove tornado that showed up in this isolated valley near Natural Tunnel State Park, not far from the Clinch River, in the shape of a dirty black cloud. And it was like that old, anybody remember the old tornado bowl games from the 70s? I'm definitely showing my age. Well, my brother and I used to just tear up stuff, and then his friends would come over and tear up the couches and things. Anyways, and the tornado bowl thing, you know, you just kind of tear your thing. This is what happened to Rye Cove. This tornado came in and boom! It just knocked this schoolhouse and started spinning around. 155 people just spinning around like the Wizard of Oz. And then when it was in the middle of this thing, everybody just landed. You had desks and kids and chalkboards. Whatever you brought to school, it's all just landing out on the ground. More than a dozen people were killed there. A.P. Carter wrote a song about it that the Carter family sang for many, many years. And if you go there up there now in the spring, in May, you may still hear the ghostly sounds of kids screaming, still screaming, as they lose their lives in that tornado almost a century ago. But Rye Cove is a beautiful place. Don't be scared to go there, okay? It looks a lot like Shady Valley. It looks a lot like Burke's Garden. It looks a lot like the Powell Valley, East Stone Gap. It looks a lot like these hidden valleys that we have all over the Appalachian Mountains. Looks like Cades Cove down in the Great Smoky Mountains. It's just a beautiful, isolated little valley. Now, Shady Valley, the Cranberry Festival, and the cranberry capital over there in Johnson County is not too far away from Trade, Tennessee in Johnson County, which is, again, where I got the story of the Prospect Hill Bed Breakfast. And there's a beautiful old folk story. Beautiful, but kind of a crazy old folk story up there on Stone Mountain. It's a musical story. It's the story of Martin Stone. Martin Stone was a fiddle player. Oh, he was a great fiddle player. He was such a good fiddle player, people would call him and say, Martin, would you come down? I'm getting married on Saturday. I want you to play that fiddle. And he'd do it. And then a lady would call and say, Martin, my baby can't sleep. Can you come down and play your fiddle and just see if she'll go to sleep? I can't do anything. And he'd come down and help out too. And then a little old man would say,
Martin, Gladys died. I want you to come down and play at her funeral. 'Cause ain't nobody ever play that fiddle the way you do. And I know she'd really love it to hear one more time you play that fiddle.
Martin played music for everybody all over Johnson County. But what he really loved was to go up there on Stone Mountain where he could just sit around and just look at everything. It's like being on top of the world up there at Trade, Tennessee, along the North Carolina-Tennessee border. He'd play his fiddle sometimes, and one time he noticed, as he played his fiddle, these snakes would come out of the ground. Why these snakes would come up out of the ground, and they'd start swaying back and forth like he's a dancing, right? Moving these little S shapes going all over. And he was just amazed by this. And he's like, ooh, I'm magical, ain't I? I'm a snake charmer. And he'd play a little bit more, and he'd just watch the snakes. And he'd be, man, that's wild. He went on back down to town. A couple days later, he went back up there again. He brought his fiddle, but he brought 2 more items. Now, he got up there, and he sat down on that stand. There wasn't anything there. All quiet. Just him and Stone Mountain. He'd play his fiddle, and it was echoing off the... No, he looked. They'd come crawling, and the next thing you know, he had the snakes, and there was a dancing. They're swaying back and forth with those S shapes again. And that's when he grabbed one of the items and pow, pow, pow! He shot the snakes. And then he grabbed the snake skins when all of them were dead, and he threw them in the other item that he brought, which was a bag. And he went back down to town, and he sold the snake skins. Well, a few days later, he went back up there, and bang, bang, he did it again. He shot all the snakes and went back down with the snake skins. I'm not going to tell you the end of that particular story. I'm not going to tell you what you might hear up there on Stone Mountain. You could guess. And I'm not going to tell you how it ended, but I'm going to give you one little hint. The snakes played the final refrain. What I love about old folk tales like this is just the keeping this old tradition alive. And I've found so many great stories through the years of a man that would walk along a creek up in Pound, Virginia, and he'd eat all these herbs and berries and stuff like this, and people out in Lee County and running at Sugar Run, and some of the other stories down into Tennessee of the Devil's Looking Glass down around Irwin. And it's these old stories that we keep alive that really bring out something that's just beautiful. But it's also our history. And there's no place better that you can find history told than in theaters. And we're lucky to have so many theaters in the Appalachian Mountains, in North Carolina, Virginia, and Tennessee. We're also lucky to have some outdoor dramas like The Trail of the Lonesome Pine over in Big Stone Gap. Or if you've ever seen this one, got to go see The Horn in the West over in Boone, North Carolina. But you better watch out because it's going to sound like Martin Stone shooting snakes because there's all kinds of loud gunshots in the middle of that thing. That is the story of how East Tennessee and western North Carolina was settled. And, of course, it's a little bit of Southwest Virginia, too, because it follows in the 1770s of the Battle of Kings Mountain and the Overmountain Men and General William Campbell, and how he led the people down, including one of our ancestors, John Greer, who was one of the Overmountain Men, going on down to defeat the British at the North Carolina, South Carolina border, and really one of, not the turning point in the American Revolution. Gosh, as I've done research, and when somebody says, this is the turning point of the American Revolution, don't believe them. I went to South Boston, Virginia, and they said, the crossing of the Dan is the turning point in the American Revolution. I went out to the Battle of the Capes at Cape Henry and Virginia Beach. This is the turning point of the American Revolution. There's a lot of turning points in the American Revolution, so it just kind of kept turning around. But anyways, it really was a good morale booster for us. And it's a good morale booster for the actors on stage at Horn in the West when they see one of the actors who played the minister there many, many years ago, and they just keep seeing him. Now, he's dead, but they just keep seeing him. His ghost just keeps showing up because he likes it there. He likes it there. Charles Elledge, he likes it there. So he keeps showing up backstage, and they're like, well, there he is again. And I'm finding that the theaters, there's an energy that the performers have, there's an energy that y'all have, there's an energy that's inside a theater that is still there at the Lyric Theater that I've written about, at Blacksburg, at the Grandin Theater in Roanoke, and there's something going on over here across the street at the Paramount. The Paranormal Paramount. Now, I'll always call it the Paramount Theater. I guess I'm supposed to call it Paramount Bristol now. Paramount Center for the Arts, Paramount, whatever you want to call it. Anyways, so this thing has been standing there for decades. It's a wonderful old theater, and I've seen all kinds of performers there over the years. Everybody from Bill Monroe and Loretta Lynn and Merle Haggard to Blackfoot and Foghat and Hootie and the Blowfish. And it's just a great place. But some of the staff for my Haunted Highlands book told me that they've seen the wispy woman up in the spotlight room. They kind of walk back and they kind of look back and she's gone. And a ballet dancer said, oh, she's out there in the crowd, out in the middle of the theater. And he'll look around and then she just sort of fades off and disappears. Another lady working at the front desk said she was in the lobby and she saw this woman in a white gown and she's kind of got closer to her. And as she did, the lady just kind of faded off and disappeared into the wall. Who is she? Who knows? But that's one of the great things about theaters is that we have these wonderful stories. But we also have the wonderful stories about the people who we've seen at these theaters. And one of the gentlemen who was one of the greatest performers that was ever known in Bristol was a man that I grew up watching as Cousin Ernie on the I Love Lucy show. Really funny guy. And when the Paramount reopened in 1991, this hometown hero who was born just over on the Tennessee side came out. And his name was Mr. Tennessee Ernie Ford.
Some people say a man is made out of mud. Poor man's made out of muscle and blood. Muscle and blood and skin and bones. A mind that's weak and a back that's strong. Load 16 tons and what do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me 'cause I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store. I was born one morning when the sun didn't shine. I picked up a shovel and I walked to the mine. I loaded 16 tons of number 9 coal, and the straw ball said, bless my soul, you load 16 tons, what do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me 'cause I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store. step aside. A lot of men didn't and a lot of men died. One fist of iron and the other of steel. If the right one don't get you, the left one will. You load 16 tons and what do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me 'cause I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store. Thank you.
We unfortunately lost Tennessee Ernie Ford right after that Paramount Theater performance in 1991, and he was gone. And I never got to meet him. I did meet his sons, and wrote some kind of article years ago. I ended up doing about 7,000 articles over the years, so I don't remember everything. I'm sorry, but I do remember talking to his sons quite a long time ago, and it was quite a joy to be able to meet them and talk to them and how much they loved their daddy. I do remember that. And it was just a joy. But one of the things that we lost him to possibly was smoking cigarettes. And I think anybody can kind of attest that, you know, I think we have finally figured out that cigarettes they're not really that good for you. And there's one of my favorite stories, and going back again to what Mr. Bud Phillips said years ago, a byproduct of historical research. One of my all-time favorite ghost stories is about a man who smoked a lot of cigarettes. Wrote about it in The Marble, my first ghost tale book. Wrote about it actually when I was in Radford University, where I went to college, and I was doing some research for my book on Southwest Virginia. And I found this file, and it said something to the neighborhood of ghost stories from Russell County that you ain't heard yet. And it told the story of Mr. A.P. Baldwin. Now, A.P. Baldwin, by God, now he liked to smoke cigarettes, and he'd pace the floor up at the Honaker High School, and he'd be like, how can I make this a better place? How can I make this a better school? He would smoke so many cigarettes that his fingers would turn yellow. But he would smoke inside that school because, you know, back in the day, you know, 60s and 70s and all this kind of stuff, they don't care. You smoke wherever you wanted to. You had commercials about cigarette smoking, whatever, you know. Can't be a man if he doesn't smoke and all, whatever, all the Satisfaction, the Rolling Stones and all. Okay, so he was smoking a lot of cigarettes. And when he died, they say he's still smoking those cigarettes. Up at the A.P. Baldwin Gymnasium, that's named for him in Honaker. Not Honaker. It's Richlands, not Richlands. It's Lebanon, not Lebanon, even though it was named for the Cedars of Lebanon. It's Buchanan County, not Buchanan County. If it was named for James Buchanan, but it's Buchanan County. And I never could figure out how this one lady I used to work with said Abingdon. It was Abingdon. It was crazy how she said. I never could pick that one up. But he would smoke these cigarettes still as a ghost, because people say they would go into the A.P. Baldwin Gymnasium at night and they'd look through the windows and they'd see what looked like the red tips of lit cigarettes still just kind of floating in there. One legendary evening, 2 teachers and a couple of students as well went into the gymnasium. And they saw what they thought was the ghost of A.P. Baldwin. I mean, he looked like A.P. Baldwin. It was a man with what looked like he had a trench coat. And he was real tall, one of the teachers said. And you could see, standing up there, you could see that little red glow, like he was smoking that cigarette high up towards the ceiling. The teacher said that the silhouette went from one end of the batting cage almost to the other, almost in an instant. Now, the lights went out except for one light right above the high jump mat, and that one light, according to the teacher, turned blood red. The students, they just screamed and ran out of the gym. The teachers, they ran up And where they had seen this apparition, they said they found ashes on the floor where it was, like it was cigarette ashes. To this day, people say they are still seeing what looks like red tips of lit cigarettes, what some say is a sign of the principal who never left school. If you go to the Barter Theater, you're going to see or hear about the legend of the theater founder who never left the Barter Theater, Mr. Robert Porterfield. Mr. Robert Porterfield is as legendary in this area as the Carter family. We have the Porterfield Highway on Route 19. We have the Virginia Highlands Festival that he started. There was the Cave House craft shop that became the Holston Mountain Artisans that he helped found just before he died in 1971. There's the mighty Martha Washington Inn that he helped get going again. But most importantly, he started the Barter Theater. Now, he was born in Austinville, Virginia. Austinville is very important. You're going to hear a lot about Austinville in the next few months as we celebrate 250 years in this country, because Austinville was the site of the lead mines. And once upon a time, where we are right now, or where you are down in Tennessee, because they didn't have the borders all set up at that time, if you're in Bristol, Tennessee, you were in Virginia. And when you have to go across the Holston River, you're at the Bristol Motor Speedway, they still thought you were in Virginia. Most of Kingsport, they still thought you were in Virginia. Until 1779, when Sullivan County was formed, not as Sullivan County, Tennessee, but Sullivan County, North Carolina. It's kind of funny. And then later it became part of the state of Franklin. It's really been certain parts of Bristol, Tennessee have been parts of 4 different states: Virginia, North Carolina, Franklin, and Tennessee. And Franklin didn't even get on the map. Franklin was named for Benjamin Franklin, but that's a whole nother story. In this area, down in there, in this portion of along the border, you had people growing all kinds of crops. And Robert Porterfield knew this. He came from the lead mines again, Austinville, where the father of Texas, Stephen Austin, also came from. And it's a little beautiful site up on the New River Trail State Park in Wythe County, Virginia. Now, this again was the courthouse town for this all of Southwest Virginia, which in those days would have stretched all out into Kentucky. All of the Kentucky, the people would meet there at the lead mines. So anyways, at this portion in these old days, Robert Porterfield left. He grew up in Saltville. Then he became an actor in New York City in the 1920s. And then, boom, the Great Depression came along and nobody was working. But he came up with this idea. You know what? There's a whole bunch of farmers down there. And they ain't got no money. We ain't got no money. We're hungry. I bet they could grow some stuff. I bet if we all came down there and we just put on some shows, I bet they'd feed us. I mean, that's better than sitting up here in New York City starving. So he brought his buddies down there to Abingdon. And boy, it was a wild bunch too. I mean, he had women that were smoking cigarettes. I mean, it didn't go over well with the white glove ladies of Abingdon back in the 30s. But he started this idea and he said, with vegetables you cannot sell, you can buy a good laugh. So they brought in all kinds of livestock. They had pigs in there, and of course they had ham. They would trade their ham for Hamlet. And once they got it established in the old Opera House, what is now the Barter Theater on Main Street, Gilliam Stage, I believe, is what we're supposed to call it now. What they have this today is they would bring in everything back in the 30s. Turtles got loose in the lobby. One old man brought in snake skins. I don't know if it was Martin Stone or not, but one old man had snake skins. One man brought in a calf, but he was too cheap to give up the rope that the calf was tied to, and the calf got in the theater and started running around, and they had to delay showtime for 5 minutes. And then there was the guy with the cow who brought his cow out on Main Street. And he brought his cow out there, and he milked it, and he came out, and he handed it to the lady at the ticket booth, and she said, "Okay, I'm going to be able to give you one ticket for this glass of milk. This is nice. I'm sure somebody's going to enjoy that, especially because it's freshly squeezed from your cow." And now I noticed that your wife is still standing over there by the cow. So, I mean, this is going to be your ticket. And so I want to know now, is she going to, do I need to get another ticket? I mean, is she going to come in too? And the man looked back at his wife, and he looked at his ticket, looked at the milk, looked at the lady, and he said,
"Oh, I don't know. She's going to have to milk her own ticket."
It went on. This was chaos. It was insane what was going on. They had vegetables piled up everywhere. But you know what? Robert Porterfield, when he died in 1971, he didn't want to leave. You think about some of the people that have come out of the Barter Theater. If you watch MASH, Larry Linville came from there. Frank Burns came from there. If you ever saw the old WKRP in Cincinnati, Richard Sanders, Les Nessman came from up there. Gregory Peck. Gregory Peck didn't even know how to tell a joke. And Robert Porterfield had this idea. He said, you know, you need to come down here every day and tell me a joke, and that is going to be your assignment. Ernest Borgnine, one of the greatest actors of the 20th century, he showed up just driving a truck. Barry Corbin, I got a chance to interview him the other day. He's been in dozens and dozens, hundreds of movies, and Urban Cowboy among them. And he said that he was staying there and got to meet everybody. He remembered some of the crazy stories about one of the dogs that Mr. Porterfield had over at the Barter Inn, and how this dog would drink out of the toilet. And there's just so many great stories of all of the actors. And so Robert Porterfield just enjoyed this. It was getting national attention. And when he died, well, he just kept showing up. People would kind of walk through the theater and say, "Hi, Bob." And they'd be like, "Ugh. You know, this is Bob. There he is. There's Bob up there, he's right up there in the up in the lobby. I don't really understand why he's up there, but that's him in that gray sweater. That is Bob. It's Mr. Bob. It's Mr. P. Mr. P, as they called him. Now, Mr. P also advocated for the continuation of that beautiful train line that ran from Abingdon on up to Damascus, over through Taylor's Valley, on past White Top Station, onto a place called Nella, which is actually Allen spelled backwards, in North Carolina, and eventually on to West Jefferson and into Ashe County. And actually, it went even further than that at one point. But this became known as the Abingdon branch of the Norfolk Western Railway, and it was the Virginia-Carolina Railway before that. It had all kinds of different names. We call it the Virginia Creeper. And again, we're all waiting on the government to kind of get it rebuilt for us after the storm came through. So right now, we just have half of that trail open between Abingdon and Damascus. But Robert Porterfield advocated for the continuation of this train because this brought passengers in. This brought people in to Abingdon, Virginia. This brought people who would, the good ladies of West Jefferson would come in and they'd stop at White Top Station. They'd have a little lunch, a little bit of a prayer session right there. Then they'd come on down into Abingdon. Everybody was charmed by Mr. Porterfield. I didn't get a chance to meet him, but my grandmother, who lived down there, went to that haunted place and probably had that spoon-snatching waitress, probably knew her back in the day, down in Greenville, Tennessee. She went up to the Barter Theater way back in the day, and she's been gone since 1976. Well, Mr. Porterfield said, we got to keep this train going. This is something that's good. This is a great way that the passengers could go, and gosh, it goes through some beautiful scenery. You're going past this gorge with these little waterfalls and these mountains that are climbing. This is an amazing place. This is an amazing journey. This is the place that passes the Devil's Stairs in Warrensville. The creepy Devil's Stairs in Warrensville. There's places all over the Appalachian Mountains named for the devil. You ever thought about that? Weird places. The Devil's Head at Chimney Rock, North Carolina. The Devil's Bathtub in Scott County, Virginia. The Devil's Marble Yard, the Devil's Courthouse. It's all kinds of places named for the devil. The Devil's Stairs was along this railroad. Once there was a minister who was driving along, and he picked up a hitchhiker down by the Devil's Stairs in Warrensville, North Carolina. And he drove along, and he didn't look back for a little bit. And he looked up in his rearview mirror, he couldn't see anything. He's like, that's weird. He just kept driving. Looked in his rearview mirror, he couldn't see the hitchhiker in the back seat. And then he turned around and he thought he saw the face of Satan. Had eyes as big as his fist, glowing red, just as spooky and as scary as it can possibly be. That minister turned back around and continued to drive, and he stopped the car to casually and quietly let this hitchhiker out. And when he did, there was nobody in the car. And it wasn't just the Devil's Stairs that was haunting this old railroad. If you go up to Taylor's Valley and Green Cove Creek, you'd hear about the Creekfield woman. Now, the Creekfield woman, some people said, would lead, if you followed her, she'd lead you to a buried treasure. And some people said if you followed her, you would end up near a rock somewhere and you would see this lady holding her severed head. There's all kinds of strange and spooky stories around Taylor's Valley and Green Cove Creek about the Creekfield woman. But again, this was a train that people loved to ride, and it became a trail that people loved to ride. And we were so blessed to have it for so many years. And gosh, we all got to look forward to it coming back someday, bigger and better than ever, and hopefully never to be destroyed again. But you know, we had a lot of history. There was a flood in 1940 that basically wiped it out. And there's a lot of stories of the floods back in 1940. That was a horrible year for the rivers around this area. But along that Virginia Creeper, there's all kinds of rocks in the creeks at White Top Laurel Creek and on down to Damascus and the South Fork of the Holston, the Middle Fork of the... You could hop across from one side of the creeks to the other in some of those little areas, Creek Junction. And it's almost kind of like being on rock islands. You might even think of it as kind of like a rock island line.
Now this here's a story about the Rock Island Line. Well, the Rock Island Line, she runs down into New Orleans. There's a big toll gate down there, and you know if you got certain things on board and you go through the toll gate, you ain't got to pay the man no toll. The train driver, he went up to the toll gate, and the man hollered and asked him what all he had on board, and he said, I got livestock, I got livestock, I got cows, I got pigs, I got sheep, I got mules, I got all livestock. He said, you're all right, boy. You ain't got to pay no toll, you can just go right on through. So he went on through the toll gate, and as he went through, he started picking up a little bit of speed, picking up a little bit of steam. As he went through the toll gate, he looked back at the man, he said, well, I fooled you, and I fooled you. I got pig iron, I got pig iron, I got all pig iron. Well, the Rock on the Line, she's a mighty good road. Yeah, the Rock on the Line, it's a road to ride. Rock on the Line, it's a mighty good road. Well, if you ride, you got to ride it like a bonnet. Get your ticket at the station on the Rock on the Line. Cloudy in the west, and it looked like rain around the curve from a passenger train. Northbound train on a southbound track. All right, leaving, but he won't be back. Well, the Rock on the Line, she's a mighty good road. Yeah, the Rock on the Line, it's a road to ride. Rock on the Line, it's a mighty good road. Well, if you ride, you got to ride it like a bonnet. Get your ticket at the station on the Rock on the Line. Well, I may be right and I may be wrong, but she gonna miss me when I'm gone. Well, the engineer said before he died there were 2 more drinks that he would like to try. Conductor said, what could they be? Hot cup of coffee and a cold glass tea. Well, the rock on the line, she's a mighty good road. Yeah, the rock on the line, it's a road to ride. Rock on the line, it's a mighty good road. Well, if you ride, you got to ride it like you're trying to get your ticket at the station on the rock on the line. Thank you.
So the Rock Island Line, as we'll now call the Virginia Creeper Line, went right into the Abingdon train station, and it passed by the last story of the evening, the last great place, the story that kind of culminates everything I've kind of sort of given y'all this evening, the mighty Martha Washington Inn. Now, if you read anything about the mighty Martha Washington Inn and talk to anybody in Abingdon, anybody anywhere around this area, you're going to be like, that has got to be the most haunted place I have ever seen in my life or heard about. It's also one of the most beautiful places you're ever going to see. So back to Horn in the West. Remember General William Campbell leading everybody down the Battle of Kings Mountain? Well, he had a little girl, and that was her house. That was Sarah's house. She had married Francis Preston, who made a lot of money in Saltville, where Robert Porterfield was from, and he actually grew up in Blacksburg, where the Lyric Theater is haunted, and he grew up at the Smithfield Plantation right there at Virginia Tech. You got to go see the Smithfield Plantation, historic Smithfield, beautiful place. So they built this big old mansion, and they built it basically on the outskirts of town. That's what it was considered in the 1830s. That was the outskirts of Abingdon as you're coming back down towards, well, there wasn't anything really here. I mean, there was the Sapling Grove post office along back in it, but there wasn't even a Bristol back in these days when they did this stuff. There was no railroad back in those days. Just the old road that kind of ran in front of that and went on up to Courthouse Hill and then on up into the next region on up towards what is now Whitfield. Well, along the way, this house became a Civil War hospital. But before that, in 1858, it had become a college for women. Now, this college for women was quite attractive to the boys up at what is now Emory and Henry University, because, that was all boys up there. That's all girls down there. And through the years, they wanted to meet those girls down there, the Martha girls, as they called them, the Martha Washington College. So if we have the Bowling Wilson Hotel named for Woodrow Wilson's wife, we have the Martha Washington Hotel named for George Washington's wife. And among the Martha girls that was there, get this, was Edith Bowling Wilson. She was there as a Martha girl for a while. And those boys, again, at Emory and Henry, they wanted to meet those girls, and they would write notes to the Martha girls. But the only way the Martha girls could write notes back is the college president had to read every note that they had sent back up there. Now, the trains were running back there. You had the main line going down to what eventually became here at Bristol and on up towards what eventually became Marion and Whitfield to Radford and on up towards Roanoke. And then, of course, you had the Virginia Carolina Railway, the Abingdon branch, going out what became known as the Virginia Creeper Trail. And the train conductors, they liked those girls too, and they'd wave at those girls. Those girls were not allowed to wave back at those train conductors. They could not drink cherry Cokes. And boy, they could not do what Tennessee Ernie Ford and A.P. Baldwin did, because if they smoked cigarettes, they got expelled from the Martha Washington College. So they weren't allowed to do that either. So under all of these tight rules, you would think that, gosh, what are we going to do? Well, they'd sit around late at night, and they'd talk about way back when. So here was this school that existed from 1858, just before the Civil War, to about 1931, a couple years before the Barter Theater opened across the street. And they'd sit around at night. One girl looked and said, "You want to hear something spooky? I'll tell you a story that's spooky. Have you ever looked on that one floor here in the college?" "What floor is that?" "The one where the blood stains won't disappear."
But why you say those blood stains won't disappear? Well, they scrub and they scrub and scrub, and they will not get rid of those blood stains. They stay there. And I heard that there's a soldier who went out there, and he was over that old opera house across the street, and he just kind of got in that tunnel, went on up, and they shot him down, and those blood stains, his ghost just comes back and lands those blood stains on that floor. I don't care what they use to bleach or anything. That stays right there. They're scrubbing it down. Well, I got a story. Remember the man that burned the courthouse? And he got on his horse. And you remember how he got shot out of the saddle? You ever seen the horse? The horse runs around. Oh, you're crazy. No, he does. The horse runs around. He's still looking for his master. We got a ghostly horse here.
Well, they tell all kinds of stories up there, and this all became the folklore and everything, and people are telling still. They say that you can see the bloodstains, and you can see the... And then one said, well, I know one story that's probably even better than that about the girl with the fiddle. No, she didn't have a fiddle. She had a violin. No, she had a fiddle. No, she didn't have a fiddle. And then one looked and said, you know, there ain't no difference between a fiddle and a violin. It's the same thing. Depends on how you're playing. And she said, well, I know that man over there on Stone Mountain could have played it, and he'd be up there because he played at my poppy's funeral. And I remember, and remember the one that they all went up there and they found him dead from all them snake bites. And today, don't tell anybody I told you this, but today they still hear him playing that violin. No, it's a fiddle. They still hear him playing up there on Stone Mountain. Well, I'll tell you this, another girl said. What I hear on third floor, I hear Beth. Oh, Beth. Oh, Beth. Now, she was the sneaky one, you know. She was the one who had that Union spy, that Yankee she brought in. And she was a nursing him, and nobody knew he was in the room. Wonder what they was up to. I bet he kissed her. I bet she kissed him back. Well, I tell you what I heard. I heard that right as he was getting ready to die, that captain looked at Beth and he said, play something, Beth, I'm going to die. And at that moment, Beth got out her violin and began to play. And today they say, if you go up, sometimes on a moonlit night, sometime on a moonless night, which is all the fun of doing historical research, because people will tell it any way you go, you can still hear Beth playing her violin at what is now the Martha Washington Inn. Well, one night there was a man who was down there and he was staying, and he comes running down to the front desk. He said, I've heard your musical ghost. You got a violin player in high and And this lady's at the front desk. She said,
sir, listen now. There's not such a thing as ghosts. That's just something they tell in the brochure, and it's okay. I'll make sure we can send up a bucket of ice for you, and it'll be just fine.
No, I heard your musical ghost. Well, the customer's always right? You know, I've worked in a hotel before. The customer's always right. So the front desk clerk, she went upstairs, and she rounded up a bellhop, and they still had a maid they could find, and all three of these employees stood up there. And they're standing outside this man's room, and he's there with them, all four of these people in the hallway. And they ain't hearing nothing. It's just complete silence. And they're like, what are we going to do? Tell this guy he's an idiot? And then they began to hear it. They heard this faint violin sound. The maid raised her eyebrows and looked at the bellhop, and they looked at each other like, my God, this is true. We got a ghost in here. Beth's playing her violin. Until that persnickety front desk clerk ran back downstairs, and she discovered that the man who had complained was staying in this room. And in this room was a concert violinist scheduled to play later that night at Emory and Henry College. so you can believe in ghost tales or not. Thank y'all very much for coming out tonight. I really appreciate you. I believe we're supposed to do some questions, so anybody just kind of shout out anything you got.
Don't shout out.
Oh, are you gonna?
I'm going to bring you the microphone because we have the YouTube audience and we want to
Oh.
be sure that they can hear it. So if you do have a question, raise your hand and I'll bring you the microphone. Anybody?
My question is, are your books for sale?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And he will be willing to
Yes.
sign them too.
Yes,
so.
yes. I have books here for sale this evening, and they're for sale all the time here at the beautiful, wonderful Birthplace of Country Music Museum. And they're on Amazon. So you'll find them anywhere on Amazon. And then they're at a lot of the state parks in Southwest Virginia, and Barnes and Noble stores and all that. So yeah, they're available a lot of different places.
Okay, I met a man the other day who worked in the Historical Society in Kingsport, and he told me that it's not Kingsport, but it's Kingsport for William King.
Right.
And you were addressing how to announce everything earlier. I just wanted to bring that up. I thought that was pretty cool. But
Yeah, that is William King. Now, William King, the William King Regional Arts Center, William King Arts Center, William King, they changed that place a lot of different names too in Abingdon. That was the old William King High School. So William King, he was, I believe, an Irish immigrant. Came up to Saltville 1790s and started what was a salt mine, and I think it was kind of claimed to be the first salt mine in the United States. And what he was doing is he was a salt baron, and he loaded up these flat boats, and they sailed them down to what is now close to the Netherland Inn in Kingsport. And this was where the North Fork of the Holston River met the South Fork of the Holston River. And that actually is where they thought Virginia ended at one point, is they kind of thought that was it. So this naturally became King''S, and then the next word, P-O-R-T. So it actually had a lot of other names in that section. But yes, indeed, that's exactly how that got its name.
Any other questions?
I've heard a lot of renditions of the Burger Bar story, and I'm wondering what your telling is.
Brace yourself on this one. So I love the Burger Bar, and I love Joe and how he's really brought that Burger Bar out and really done that. I've written articles about the Burger Bar, and great hamburgers, and John loves it, and it's great. And I'm going to go back to my hero, Bud Phillips. I'm going to go back to some research I've done, and I'm going to go back to the chance that when I was a newspaper reporter and got a chance to meet a lot of people like Dolly Parton and Johnny Cash and June Carter and Bill Monroe and B.B. King and all these famous people. One of the people that I did get a chance to meet, and one that I interviewed that's in this particular book called Along Virginia's Route 58, was Charles Carr. Now, Charles Carr was the driver for Hank Williams on his final journey as 1952 bled into 1953. And he was a teenager. And Charles Carr never retraced the route. So his father and Hank were friends. And the story was, Hank needed to go from Knoxville up to West Virginia in the middle of the night in these snowy weather. And they go through Tennessee and they get a traffic ticket and they come on in here. And to think now, the biggest superstar of country music just died in the back of the car. The police, the reporters, everybody is saying, where did you stop? What's going on? You got a ticket? You had a relief driver? There's the story of Donald Surface in Bluefield, West Virginia, that got out. Bottom line is, the Burger Bar was a dry cleaner. in 1952 into 1953. At least if you match up the address and where that was, it was a dry cleaner at that time. I wrote a lot of articles in the Bristol Herald Courier over the years about the Hank Williams story. And having talked to Charles Carr, I said, let me ask you this now. Have you ever thought that when you were traveling, you were going through a Bristol and a Bristol and a Bluefield and a Bluefield, and you got up to Beckley, and all the towns are all named B, and you're from Alabama. You haven't been into these mountains before. He said, I've never retraced that route. He said, he said later that they think that the final stop was actually at the Doughboy restaurant in Bluefield, not at the Burger Bar. Other people said, and I met Jack Trayer, who was another legend in Bristol, said that Trayer's restaurant might have been the place where they stopped. And so there's just a lot of stories that kind of go back into this. There's an article that I have that I wrote many years ago in which I interviewed people in Bluefield, and the daughter, I believe, of Donald Surface, who was the relief driver that they hired along the way. I mean, people started telling stories that Hank was still alive. He got out of the car, and his kid was asleep inside. And Hank got, and there were stories of people in Claypool Hill said, yeah, I got in Hank's Cadillac, and I drove it around. I mean, there's all kinds of legends and things. But I also remember, I wish I wrote this lady's name down. Gosh, I wish I wrote this lady's name down, because she probably was the smoking gun out of all of it. She called me at the newspaper office 20-some years ago, and she said, I saw that article you wrote about the Burger Bar. And she said, my family owned that time. I said, yeah? She said, that wasn't a Burger Bar, it was a dry cleaner. And I said, it was. She said, well, why didn't you call me? She said, oh, I didn't want to spoil anybody's fun. The story is in this book, Hank's Last Ride. It's in this book, Along Virginia's Route 58. So if you're interested in more of that, or the Rye Cove tornado, or more about the Barter Theater, or the Virginia Creeper, or Ghosts all the way, and legends and stories from the Atlantic Ocean to the Cumberland Gap, that's what that book's all about. So it's a lot of fun with that one. So anyways, give me another question. Somebody give me something else.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment.
Yes.
Because I had my junior or senior high school prom at the Martha Washington, and we talked a lot about the bloodstains, but the story we heard that it was on a part of the Martha Washington hallway that was carpeted, and that the blood would start to seep up through the carpet and you could actually touch it, which makes it even grosser and horribler. But we were teenagers. That was the story we told. So.
And there's legends that story goes on and on and on, and there's various different versions of it, and it's a lot of it is tied to that tunnel. And a lot of people said, do you have a Ghost of the Martha Washington? I said, you got to pick a book. I said, this one has the blood stains. This one has the Ghost of the Napoleon Room. This one has the Ghost of the Horse. This one has the Ghost of the Musical Ghost. And this tells you more about the Martha Girls and a little bit more about the musical Ghost. So it just kind of keeps going on.
Anyone else? Well, this has been wonderful. We've had a great storyteller up here, a great musician to sort of share some tunes with us. Thank you, everyone, for being here with us. And do talk to Joe afterwards, buy one of his books, get them signed. But before you go, I wanted to tell you just about a few things to look forward to in the next month or so. Our next speaker sessions will be on Tuesday, November 11th at 7 p.m., and that's going to be with country singer Reese Palmer on her experiences as a musician and her work on Color Me Country. So that's going to be a great program to take part in. Our new special exhibit just opened up today, so if you haven't had a chance to see it before you came in tonight, please be sure and plan to come see it before it leaves in April. That is Boot Scootin' History, the Craft and Stories of Cowboy Boots. Thursday, October 16th, so just a couple of days from now at 7 p.m., we have our next Farm and Fun Time show with Jay and the Causeways and Dory Freeman. And then on Saturday, November 8th at 7 p.m., we've got some more spooky season stuff with Love and Murder a cappella, a ballad swap concert with 5 female ballad singers of 8th, 9th generation sort of time frame, singing some great murder ballads and unrequited love and betrayal and all those horrible things that happen in those old songs. So be sure and come out and join us. Please come down and talk to Joe, get a book, get it signed, and thanks for being here.
Coming on strong.